All right, hello everyone, welcome. Thank you for coming. My name is Aditya Shankar, and welcome to the first UW Reality Lab lecture of this fall. For those who don't know, the UW Reality Lab is an academic center housed in computer science and engineering, where we try to push forward the state-of-the-art in AR and VR, which are super exciting technologies in this time and age. And also, we want to educate the next generation of students, researchers, developers, and creators. And one of the ways we like to do it is have a lecture series. So we bring people together in community and on campus and have great minds in AR and VR come and give us talks about their perspective and their field. So today we have Ben Lowe, who's a professor at the University of Florida. So he has been doing like virtual reality, mixed reality, and computer graphics all the way back from UNC days in Chapel Hill. And then now he's focusing on an effort called VR for social good. So the question is, how do you solve socially relevant problems using technologies like VR and AR? And what is the framework for it? How do you evaluate it? Measure success and so on and so forth. And hopefully there'll be some cool, interesting applications as well. So with that, let's welcome Ben.
All right, thank you so much. Thanks for having me here. I saw the speaker list you all have. I wish I was a student in your class. It's really, I think you all have an amazing set of folks that are going to be coming in and sharing their ideas with you. So today, as Aditya said, I'm at the University of Florida. I've been in VR for about 20 years. And I've really been passionate about saying, what can VR be really good for? Hopefully, I know a lot of people here are either in the VR class or interested in VR. That's a question that you have in your mind. And hopefully, by sitting through this class, you'll have some ideas about how we can apply it. Another way I often wish we titled this lecture and this talk, instead of VR for the social good, or the class is virtual storytelling for social goods. Because whenever you start framing VR as storytelling, people start having much different ideas of what to try to build. Okay? All right, so a quick conflict of interest. I'm also co-founder and co-owner of a company called Shadow Health, which commercializes virtual humans. We sell to nursing schools, so if anybody here is a dean of the College of Nursing here, then we need to talk. But otherwise, I'm not trying to sell it to any of you, but if you do have interest and you have questions, and I do hope you ask questions as I talk, because hearing me talk for an hour is not necessarily a great thing. You do ask, if you're interested, how do you get ideas out of the research lab, VR ideas, and then make it accessible to, we have over 100,000 users using this a year at 1,500 universities and colleges. So if you are interested in how to get VR ideas out and commercialized, that's something I'm very passionate about. So I'm very much a hybrid of both a professor for over 16 years, but also an entrepreneur for over 7 years. All right, the goal of this talk is to get more of us to participate in building VR. Now, some of you who took a class are already sold on that idea, but I want to motivate many, many more people. And hopefully you take this idea, you hear about it, you want to visit the website, vrforthesocialgood.com, and then you want to get more people involved and push forward and want to learn more. So what we are thinking about is you building experiences, VR experiences for the social good. And when we ask people, what's stopping you? Because most of us are for the social good. It tends to be one thing we're all on the same side of. What's stopping you? What's stopping you right now? A lot of people say, well, I'm really, really busy, right? I don't have the equipment or the training to get started. I don't even know where to start. So that's what we saw when we asked this question to a lot of people. And my response to you is, what about today is beginning of October still, roughly, the first week in October. By the middle of November, what if you could be building your first VR application to improve the social good? Do you want to do it? And most people say, yeah, just take a little bit of time. Let's do it. How can we do it? But I want to make sure that, this is the entrepreneurial side, that I deliver value to you. Okay? So right now, just to give you a little bit of insight about me, I've been in the VR field for about 20 years. When I started, our displays were 320 by 240. Now you've got 1080p displays and higher on these different devices. My research is into using virtual mixed augmented reality for training. I teach classes right now. My VR class has got 90 students in it, and we teach VR for the social good, around social good issues. And again, I've got an entrepreneurial angle where we think about using VR for the hundreds of thousands of users out there. So what do you all want to make sure that I address? The free question, I'm going to try to make sure I answer this before the end of the talk if I have any insights. Yes?
Yeah, go ahead.
Would you mind to talk about like your perception about VR and AR? Like, how do you feel like, is that a real future or is that something like fantasy people are dreaming about.
Okay, so let me repeat back. So by the end of the talk, you hope to know whether my perspective is AR, VR, is it a niche thing, or is it something that is more globally, is it a one-time fad, or is it something that's got lasting input? And the spoiler answer is, if you all don't see your role in AR and VR, I think it'll be a flash in the pan. Okay? If you just see that as something to consume as opposed to create and be involved with creating, I think it will have a very, very limited application domain. Because empowering the thousands of people across this campus to think about where it can go, I would bet on that to be a way to discover how VR should look. Okay? What's another question? I'm going to come back to that. If you don't have the answer at the end of this, I want to make sure I address it specifically.
Interjection is that this is a joint with the actual class for building VR applications. So fortunately, a lot of people here are going to be the builders in the future.
Excellent.
So.
Very cool.
I'd be curious for you to talk about like the social part of, you said the social good, and like because as we go forward, we're just so much more plugged in and like taken out of reality, and going into virtual reality, and that has like more or less like cultural and psychological consequences, and so how do you think about that while you put out more and more ideas for like VR and AR lifestyles?
Okay, very cool. So if I could repeat back, as we progress, we're more plugged in, more than ever. Now we want to do virtual reality as opposed to reality. How does that balance with the humanity in all of us? And the spoiler answer for that question is where we see the best AR, VR projects actually include the most humanity in it. The ones where we connect best, again, with our fellow humans seem to be the ones that are the best. But again, if you don't see the answer by the end, I'm sure happy to make sure we tackle that. One more, and then I'll continue on. One more thing that you all think, burning question, want to make sure that I get at somebody here. Yes?
So you're probably going to tackle about the education side of things, right? Is that right? So,
potentially. There's many different education angles, so I don't assume it.
Wondering, how do you see the value of VR, AR in terms of like reducing the digital gap? Like how like have and have not, and then the accessibility of the VR, AR technology in the future.
Okay. Accessibility, not increasing the digital divide or the digital gap and addressing it. I don't think I've ever been asked that question, but I will try to layer that in whenever possible. All right. I wanted to think about this question for a beginning. So I've been taught that telling stories is good, so I'll start off with a story here. So I want you to think about, first of all, what's your first VR experience? Remember what it was? Where were you? What you saw? How did you feel after that? Okay, I'll tell you mine. I love this and my brother hates it because he pops up on the screen. That's me on your left. It was 1992. I was junior in high school, and I'm originally from Malaysia. And we went back home, and we were in Genting Highlands, which is where there's tea plantations. There was a resort there, and then an arcade. And I walked into this arcade because I was too young to go to the casino, and I saw this. It was one of the first attempts at commercializing VR. It was a video game called Dactyl Nightmare. Matter of fact, through the power of YouTube, where everything is there, there's actually a video. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and mute this because it doesn't really matter. I'll talk through it. But this is what I saw in that arcade. You can see high-quality graphics, great tracking. The concept of textures is not a thing yet. Right? And for some reason, there's a pterodactyl that's flying around. Right? But the reality game is much like many games today. Still, your goal is to shoot the other person. My uncle was gamely. So I played this game, and I remember thinking, I took this off. I go, wow, that was incredible. Because for a few minutes, I wasn't in that arcade in Malaysia. Right? I was in this world that had been created there, even as rudimentary as it was. And I knew, even 1992, that is amazing. And I wanted to do something with it. I didn't know what. So yeah, if you could, the pterodactyl randomly came down and picked people up and hurt them. Okay. And of course, after that, you talk about the number of articles that came out about, are we going to live our life entirely in virtual reality? There was a bunch of futurists and ethicists that said, oh no, we are in a world where people spend all their lives in VR instead of building human connections. This was 1993. That's what, a while ago, 25 years ago, right? So I think we can safely say that hasn't happened yet. We're all physically here. So there was a lot of thoughts originally, even back then, how much is virtual reality, just even the title virtual and reality, is going to impact society, things like that. I was so moved that I saved up all my money. In 1996, I bought my own first head-mounted display. It was this VFX1 headgear. Again, 320 by 240 graphics. It cost me $600 back in 1996, which was a lot of money even then, especially then. And I remember the reason why I wanted it, because I want to play this game called Quake. Familiar with Doom. Doom became Quake, and on and on. And now, of course, they've got many more remakes. But I remember I got this, and I just played it with my friend over a dedicated LAN. That's how we had to play way back then. I remember I played a dedicated LAN match with my friend. Guess who won? Me or him? Him. I mean, it was so cool because I could look where I wanted, but in terms of playing the game, it was terrible. And he clearly won. So I remember that, and I quickly sold it. So I was able to recoup the money. All right, so it's $5.99. This was the promotional video. The promises, I'm sharing these slides, and I'll make a link available so you can go through it. The promises made in this video are almost comical because he talks about, that's actually one of my favorite games of all time. Anyway, so he talks about how, this is Descent, how your world will be changed from now on. You're going to be spending time in a virtual world all the time. So that was back in 1995. And so from there, I actually went on to study avatars, which are human representations in the virtual world, specifically of the user. I went to the University of North Carolina. I was able to do a lot of work with large area tracking, but I was very interested in the form of people seem to be very impacted by the form of humans inside VR, which I found very, very interesting. And so since then, since 2003, so it's been about 16 years at the University of Florida, I do a lot of work on virtual humans. So here we see a human. This is a real person here. This is my colleague, Dr. Adam Wendling. He is training on how to be part of an operating room team with a bunch of virtual people around. And so we do a lot of work with trying to train people, such as him, how to be on a team, how to be a good teammate. Right? So we actually train things such as how do you handle bullying, how do you stand up for the patient. So trying to use these virtual reality topics to train social interactions that are normally very, very difficult to do. But virtual people, yet again. And then, again, since the last 7 years, it's also been getting that in lots of people's hands. So having hundreds of thousands of people talking with our virtual characters and learning how they respond to them. So if you were to take a look, and then here, what I'm going to talk about today is really this work for VR for the social good. So for the long time in that whole history, if you wanted to get involved with VR at the University of Florida and you typed the University of Florida virtual reality, you would get my name. Right? And that's great. So you could go on, contact me and say, when can I have a few minutes of your time, professor, because you're so busy? How can I find out how to use VR? I need to try to fit in on your schedule. Maybe that happened. Maybe it didn't. You come in there. We would have to try to find space to try to get started. It would take a very long time. Most of the time, most people who came in my office, we never got anything going because it was too difficult. And so the push to solve that is what I'm here to talk about, which is called VR for the social good, which are student and community-driven projects that involve hundreds of users, hundreds of students, and dozens of projects that we've created over the last few years. Basically, how can we democratize virtual reality? So if you look at my story, for a very long time, I was a consumer of VR, and only very recently did I start thinking about how do I create VR. It took almost 8-10 years. What I hope to do is short-circuit that for a lot of you all and to focus on creating right off the bat. And why would you want to create something? To focus on social good. So if we were to take, I do this sort of for fun, but it has a great impact. If you were to look at all the different cities, these are where all the big universities are in the world. Okay? So for a long time, even up to till now, if you wanted to learn how to build a VR app, for your VR application, where did you need to live? And you can see here, this would be one of the worst cell phone plans you'd ever sign up for, right? You would never buy this plan. But the reality is, if we wanted to build something in VR, you wanted to get the training, you want to have access to the equipment and all that, this is where you had to be. You had to be fortunate, obviously. You all are there, right? You're fortunate. You're here. But I grew up in rural Oklahoma. Like right over here. That's where I grew up. Okay? And luckily, we have universities somewhat close by, but you can see for big chunks of the world, there aren't. I hope to change that. I hope you're along there. Okay, so one thing I want to focus on, what Aditya and I were talking about, what's the main value? What have you learned in trying to get hundreds of people to learn how to build VR? What have you learned from having dozens of people propose projects? They've worked on it, they've created prototypes, they've even gone off to write papers and apply for grants. What have you learned? And it's number one lesson is don't focus on VR. VR is for one thing and one thing only, is to tell stories. And it's almost, if you could rebrand your class, call it storytelling. I know that a lot fewer people would sign up for it, but that would be the first thing to think about. Because so the first thing we've learned is when we talk about VR is what stories do you want to tell? We focus on stories that need to get told, and you quit worrying about head mounts and tracking and whether you're going to see it on a phone or a cave or see it on a tablet or how many degrees of freedom. If that stuff goes away and you focus on the story, you get people to really open up. Because VR is really a combination of three things. And if you're in the class, you know this. VR is the immersive technology. That's what a lot of people focus on. But super important is the environment. And here's the part that hopefully, if you leave out nothing else, the role of the user's imagination that comes in. And all of this combines, they need a story. Plus, humans are story people. We love stories, right? We were born to not put on a head mount. We're born to hear and receive stories from other people. See, for a long time, VR was for a few people. So the stories that they need to be told, they could get a huge return on investment from. So VR was for a few very, very rich people. My advisor, Larry Hodges, used to say, Buzz-like advisor, used to say, for a few rich people. So who could afford that? This is, for example, a driving simulator. I went to visit University of Iowa. They took me to their driving simulator. It's amazing. It's also tens of millions of dollars. But they have their return by testing cars and safety measures is a lot higher. So they can afford it. Right? Other people is pilot training. So for example, if you ever get a chance to fly a Boeing 737 flight simulator, by the way, I got to go to the NASA Langley, go do it. It's amazing. Costs $10 million plus to get one simulator. But why is it worthwhile to buy a $10 million simulator as opposed to going to get Microsoft Flight Simulator for your PC for just, what, $20, $30? Why is it valuable to spend $10 million? You can have, what, thousands of copies of Microsoft Flight Simulator because it adds value. So if you ever get a chance to fly a flight simulator, highly recommend it. I've got lots of great stories about getting to do this as a graduate student. But the point is that this interface and this level of technology was super, super important. So they had a good story to tell. Architectural walkthrough. This was one of the pioneering uses of virtual reality. Again, why did this work? They got a great return on investment. To build a building costs a lot of money. To find errors early on is really great, right? It saves you a lot of money. So, again, these were the people who had stories that could overcome the cost of tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars to get into VR. So who got to participate? VR between 2014. If you look at the x-axis with how much experience you needed in VR, for example, developers, coders, technicians to upkeep all the equipment, you needed a ton of experience. You also needed a lot of resources, the amount of money you needed. So you needed very experienced people, lots of money, and up to 2014. Then what happened in 2014? We all know what happened, right? You all are definitely part of that story. We got the VR for the many. Oculus got involved. Facebook bought Oculus for a couple $2 billion. Everybody got excited about it. Now we have mobile VR, and we have commercial VR, such as again, computer tethered, but now hopefully soon to be not computer tethered commercial VR. And these became widely available. So now the price point came from tens of thousands down to just a few $100s. Now the question is, what can one do with these platforms? Just because they're cheap doesn't mean that there's a need for it. We need to discover what that is. However, when you type in virtual reality on Google Images, this is what you get. So if you had somebody who was not fortunate enough like you all to sit in a class taught by somebody who's been in VR for a long time, what is the message that people are getting from seeing these images? Some thoughts? Yeah?
Wearing actual glasses.
Okay, so there's clearly only one thing that's called virtual reality. It's called, you have to wear a head mount, right? What do you think these people are? What do you think the emotion of these people all seem to be? Like amazed, right? They're all in just an unbelievable set of excitement right now. What else do people get from this? Do you all see from this? Blue. Oh, okay. That's interesting. Okay. That seems to be an interesting color choice. Huh? Yeah.
It seems to be like two different ways people interact with the VR. Like some images have something in like their hands, whereas some of them have people interacting with the air.
Oh, okay. Okay. Right. So some of them have like touch controllers of some kind. Some of them just have gesture controllers. Okay. Anything else?
It looks like one of those videos where like the device hasn't really been designed yet. It's for the future.
Okay. Okay. So marketing might have gotten ahead of the tech and started building out a lot of stuff. Right, but fortunately, actually, all the stuff is relatively real. I looked at every image, but most of them is real tech. I saw a hand in the back.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's like a very high-tech thing that you consume. I think one person's like made it in their house, but it's not like an everyday.
Okay, very cool. So you just said consume. I love that word because if you are somebody that looked at this, it's hard for you to see where your role is in this, right? It must be something that you consume whenever, there must be something good enough for you to consume, and then therefore you will start consuming. In many ways, it's almost like going to go see a movie. Do I really want to spend I don't know what it is in your city, in Gainesville, it's about $12.50 to go see a movie, right? And it's got to be a certain level of goodness of movie, or I'm not going to spend that much money, right? And you have almost that same mental model. We're going to change that mental model from that mental model of consumption to creation, much like the video camera you have on your phone. You will now shoot videos for that. Sometimes you're trying to shoot a video, for me, shooting videos of my kids so my parents can see their grandkids. Or sometimes I'm trying to shoot a video to make it go viral because I want lots of people to be impacted by it. So I want to change the concept of VR from being this thing you consume to something that you create to have impact around a message that you care about. There's one more. Let's just take one more hand up here, and then we'll move on. But I'll stay around for questions if there's opportunities for that. Yeah.
It doesn't look like it's focusing really much at all on the content that's created by VR. It's all on like the people using it.
Oh, very good. Very good. I like that. Yes, and or you're not even sure what this is, right? Did he create a world or what's going on? But I think this is important to think about what is the message that folks are getting. Whenever students come into my class and they sit down, this is what they think about. This is what they've seen coming in. And they happen to be a computer science major most of the time. And they're saying, oh, I want to be involved with creating so that I can make this person do that. Okay? That's what they think. That is a very much a mental model that they come in. So I think it's important to understand where they come from. But I want to change this so that this message comes across so we're not consumers. So when I ask people, have you tried VR? I can ask this question. How many people have tried VR? Okay. Very, very high number. One would expect that, being in a class in VR. So when I ask students now it's about 80%. The cool part is about 5 years ago, before the Oculus DevKit 2 really started getting out there, and I asked this question, it'd be less than 10%. So as a VR researcher, that's very exciting for me. I'm like, that's awesome. We've got users. Okay. But if you ask a lot of researchers, how many of them have tried VR? It tends to still be the 80-20 rule. If I ask entrepreneurs, that's my business partner, David. A lot of them have never tried VR. They've heard about it, but they don't know whether to risk investing money in it. I actually gave this talk in a prison voluntarily. I actually got to go in there, practice this talk at Marion Correctional Institute. It's between minimum to maximum security prison. It's a pretty intense place. And I asked the prisoners there, how many of you tried VR, surprisingly? Some had. It was not totally zero, but some of them had obviously been in there for a long time, and they did not have access to it. How many people here have tried using VR for something else other than entertainment? Okay. It's about the same level as I usually see, about 20%. So most people's exposure to that is usually some game or some tech demo, and that's the end of it, right? So if you look at researchers and entrepreneurs and prisoners, it continues to scale on down. And do you see yourselves creating VR experiences? Again, now obviously people here, a lot of you are in the class, so you probably have a slightly different view. A very small number. 20% of people see themselves as creators. Much more see themselves as consumers. Researchers, they actually end up being about the same because they can actually see themselves potentially creating using VR. But I thought it was interesting. Prisoners got to 0. Nobody saw themselves as being a creator of VR. I'm in here. What am I going to do? Why would I need to know this VR? It really made me ask myself, how can they get value from this talk? It actually made me change the title of the talk. So I said, hey, VR is a storytelling medium. Do you have a story that somebody else needs to experience? Just one line. That's all I said. If VR is a storytelling medium, does somebody else need to experience the story that you need to have told? All of a sudden, students said, well, yes, social awareness. They became excited. They wanted to learn. Some of them were still skeptical, but a lot of them were involved in social causes they were interested in. Researchers said, hey, perhaps this can help me with my work. I don't know what resources it will take. I don't have much time. Entrepreneurs said, well, I have an idea I'd like to test, but I'm risk adverse. Definitely tech speak. But here's the part that's really cool. When I said that to the prisoners, almost everybody raised their hands. I said, well, what stories do they need to hear? I said, well, my story needs to be told. When I said, who needs to hear it? Kids from my neighborhood. I want them to see where I made a decision and ended up. Like, this is what my life is like. Or they said, I need the general public to know what my life is like now because we need prison reform. This is what I'm going through is not humane. Okay. All of a sudden, by just changing it, a whole group of people got really fired up and saying, I've got a story. And I said, you know what? That story can be told to anybody with a smartphone. How many people here have a smartphone? Does anybody here not have a smartphone? Okay. So everybody in this room could be experiencing a story that's being told in VR, right? And you can go to YouTube, do a 360 video. You could potentially download an app. All of us have the potential to experience a story that those prisoners that I was talking to had in their mind. I go, well, why don't you get started? Well, they said, well, I don't have the resources. I don't know how to program. I don't know how to do all that. So that's where we wanted to fix that problem. So before 2014, we said this. Since 2014, the problem that we see, the resources that are required has now become a lot lower, right? So resources became a lot lower. The amount of experience that was needed was a lot lower. But I mean, it was a little bit lower, but you still needed a lot. People really thought to build VR, you needed to be potentially a college graduate with a computer science degree. And what we're pushing for with VR for the social good is to move it here. It's a lot larger picture because we think it means a lot more. So the resources required are very, very low. And what we're trying to do is empower hundreds of people a year to be able to build VR applications. All right? Let's see how we do it. All right. So how did this all happen? This is my good friend, Sri Kalyanaraman. He and I have a goal to explore the different craft brew places around Gainesville. There are a lot of different exploding ones. And so by going around having some beers, we said we had to come up with something out of all this. So we said, hey, we both are very interested in VR. Can we see how we can combine our forces and study virtual reality? And what Sri does, he's a college of journalism professor, and he's interested in how to send messages using different mediums. I'm a much more traditional computer scientist that went up the comp sci track, but we said our connection between a computer scientist and a journalist, and we wanted to see how VR could be applied. What if we could create an ecosystem where that could happen? Okay, so we created this concept where we were being approached by a bunch of people. We called them seekers. All right, seekers were people across campus. We had researchers reaching out to us, innovators. We had entrepreneurs. We had for-profits and non-profits. They're reaching out to us and said, hey, I think VR sounds really, really exciting. I'd like to get involved. We talked about what the challenging part of that is they didn't know how to get started. So here's an example one. This is Dr. Jason Minnelli. He's an interior design professor at the University of Florida. He came in and he said, hey, could VR nudge my interior design students to design empathetically? So his idea was when my students are creating a layout for a classroom or a hospital or a store, if they were to navigate their design from the perspective of someone who needed accessibility accommodation, such as somebody with a wheelchair or had limited eyesight or was a young child, would that impact their design thinking? I go, that sounds amazing. I don't know. Maybe it could. Right? So we wanted to connect them with solvers. Separately, there was all this excitement around VR coming across campus. These were students of all majors coming together going, hey, this VR stuff's pretty exciting. Right? We saw there were high school students and age up. They were any major. They didn't have to have any background in programming. They were excited about VR, and they wanted to learn whether they could use it. But for what? They wanted to just learn VR just to learn VR. Right? They were just excited about the technology. They'd played it, but they wanted to know more about it. But beyond that, that was about the extent of their thinking on it for many of them. So they thought about starting organizations for students interested in learning about VR. So this was actually a picture from the first group meeting of students who were interested in VR across campus. It was about 3 years ago. If you notice, there's actually many, many different majors represented in here, still mostly men. right? So you see here that the ones who initially saw value was pretty much similar to a lot of computer science classes, unfortunately. So what we did, Sri and I did, was a very simple thing. We were talking, hey, is your email inbox full of professors and other people reaching out to you to get involved with VR? Yes. Are you also being approached by students who say, hey, I want to learn a lot about VR, but I don't know what to work on or how to get started? We all said yes. I said, hey, sounds like a connection can be made here. What about if we combine them together? We created this ecosystem around them, and they were able to go off and go do stuff. So we have seekers who had problems, need people with skills. We have solvers who had skills and need people with problems, and we connected them together. So what we do in our class, and I'll talk about it in more details, we have seekers come in and they get connected with a team of students that include technology people, like computer scientists. We also have people from journalism and other domains where there's more narrative structure. We're getting people from design, such as art and graphic design, and oftentimes students from a variety of majors, like chemistry and psychology and nursing. We can combine them to work on a social good problem. And for the faculty amongst us, to do something like that requires a lot of support around. There's a lot of thought we put into making sure the infrastructure is available for students. All the training is available. Student-led training groups are there. We have community of support. There's a multifaceted network around these students who are working on these social good issues. All right, so assignment 1. This is the class. I'm teaching this class. We've taught this class now 4 times. Assignment number 1. The first few weeks of class, learn VR individually and create your first VR application in 5 weeks. So that's our hook. Anybody can learn how to build their first VR application in 5 weeks. Right? If you just do this very simple set of tutorials, I have high school seniors that come into my lab every summer. They go through it, and they can create their first VR app in a few weeks. Okay? Doesn't require any programming. With Unity, and you can deploy it on Google Cardboard. It can come out very, very quickly. And then after that, for the second part of the class, they do assignment 2, which is you connect with a solver, work on a larger project for the next 11 weeks, and then you demo it on demo day. So whenever you tell students to learn VR individually and create their first VR application, what they think about, and when we didn't give them any guidelines, was this. They built a game. Because they thought, oh, I love games. I will do it. We said, oh, it's got to be for social good. And they'll say, OK, I'll overlay a game mechanic onto a social good problem. So you're simply playing a game, but instead of you're just doing a mod where all the characters are now trying to combat climate change, which is not the same thing as actually trying to tackle a problem. So Dr. Kalyanaraman, he came up with a brilliant idea. He goes, we're not here to help Nike sell more shoes. Right? Nike's a sponsor of Florida football, so we love them, but that's not our goal here. That's not our goal in this class. So how can we get students to think about social good as the basis as opposed to technology? And that's really hard for me because I'm a technologist. I get it. I'm a computer scientist. You ask me to start building something, I start thinking about code. I start thinking about libraries and assets and how to combine it all together. What's the user interface? All these things. But we didn't want them to think about that. So his brilliant idea was to have a framework to hang all of our projects on. And we had to choose a framework that most people that we were going to run into would be agreeing that these are valuable goals to work towards. Because we didn't want to get into some ideological discussion about what is social good. So we used the UN Sustainable Development Goals. These are 17 goals that the UN has set aside. Here, I think I zoom in. Assignment 1. Learn VR. You're going to look at the sustainable goals. You can choose one of them. We're going to fill out a VR document, go through tutorials, and then you're going to deploy it on Unity. So let's take a look at the goals. Here they are. So the first question on the first day of class, I asked students, take a look at this set. Which one are you passionate about? Most people are on the same side, thankfully, of these topics, right? Most people are for no poverty. Most people are for zero hunger. But there's one of these that tends to get people really fired up. All right? All right, choose one of them. You can just keep one in your head. You don't have to raise your hand up. Here, I'll read them. There's the ones that are very, very popular for folks. Quality education. Students are very, very interested in that one. Gender equality. Reduced inequalities there. Affordable, clean energy. These are the topics that students choose the most often. Okay? So choose one. Now, the second thing we ask you to do is your VR, remember what VR is all about? Storytelling, right? So what story do we need to tell? Choose an organization that's working on this problem. and you're going to tell a story around their message. All right? So again, first thing we ask you to do is choose one of these. So an example would be, if you want clean water and sanitation, UNESCO is a organization that is very passionate about helping the world have access to clean water and sanitation. Okay, so what is UNESCO's message? One of UNESCO's message is reclaiming stormwater, and how if we can increase how a lot of developing countries are reclaiming stormwater, we can actually address a lot of clean water issues in the developing countries. Okay, now, what story do people need to see about that? Think about that. If you're UNESCO and you want to help people to understand reclaiming seawater or stormwater is important, and that's your message, how can you tell a story around that? And then finally, at the very end of all that, we ask you, okay, why would VR be good for that? And only at the very end do we bring virtual reality into the game. And we say, why is virtual reality potentially the best way to tell that story? The reason why is because they've already tried everything else. UNESCO's already tried telling that story through PDFs, available workshops, and everything else, and they're not making the headway that they want to on that problem. And so now you get to propose a hypothesis, say, I think that VR might help with that message. Okay? So this is how we get students to quickly tackle something. So here, people choose education, they choose health. These are some of the other topics. They really choose a lot of gender equality, peace, justice, strong institutions, sustainable consumption and productivity, and poverty. And as an educator, by the way, I find it very exciting to see the passion the students have for these topics. They come in, they are socially motivated, they're very excited about making a difference. It's very exciting to see what they choose to come up with. So what can students even build in 5 weeks? I'm going to give you some YouTube examples from some of the best projects. So one of the students was talking about quality education, and he was talking about there is over 800 million children out there that do not have access to good quality eyeglasses. Okay? Now, most of us in this room, I suspect, are able to read the screen here. We're very, very fortunate. It's actually a very fortunate accident for a lot of us that we happen to live in an environment. We've got the resources to see clearly the screen here. So he said, what about if I could let people, this is a student who did not know Unity. His name is Takashi Wicks. He did not know Unity. He did not know any of this. And in the first 5 weeks, he was able to create this. Let's hope it kicks in there. So he said, what does the world look like to a student without proper eyesight? So he has you play this small game where you hear the words defined on the screen, and once you hear it, you just look at it for a while, and then the reticle identifies you've detected something, and you get points how quickly you're able to find those words, right? So that's great. So he is able to say, hey, this is what the world looks like for people who have access to good eyesight, good proper prescription glasses, but that's not everybody in the world. So I'm going to let this thing play out for a second. He wanted to give people the experience. The story he wanted to tell is, what does the world look like to the 800 million students that don't have access to good glasses? And so there you go. He comes off. Unity, very simple what he did, right? It's not very, very difficult. But building empathy in people, trying to get people to say, hey, if I wanted to donate money to a charitable cause, could I imagine going to school and seeing the world through these glasses, through these eyes? So obviously it's a lot more difficult to do the study and the training, but this is a vision that a story that Takashi wanted people to experience. So after this, it continues on where he gives you statistics and how to be active to help address this problem. But again, yeah, so here you can see some stats about how many people have access to those things. I think this one's also pretty interesting. This was one on, oh, good, on depression. This is a person who wanted to give the story to help people understand. This student, I believe, had depression, was interested in seeing how they could get their story across to people who don't understand what the world looks like to somebody that was dealing with some situations that, again, if you're fortunate enough to not have to experience, it's hard to understand what that world looks like to them. So again, the story here is they wanted to say, hey, if I could get my fellow students to understand what the world looks like through my eyes, could I help them understand and potentially help them interact with me better? So I think that what's really exciting here is the variety of ideas that come to play. All these assets were just grabbed from asset stores and put together. The scripts they quickly grabbed, but it's more about telling the story, trying to figure out what is the right story to tell. And we really had, again, at the end of the first 5 weeks, we had 91 of these projects that we have, and they're all available online. If you go to vrforthesocialgood.com, we've got YouTube playlists of all the projects that we've done, and by now we have probably 250 videos such as this, where you can look and get inspired by projects that people have tried to tackle, and again, just within the first few weeks. So what did we learn from the first few weeks? One, focusing on an organization's message is very, very powerful. It helps connect the students to why they're trying to do. What are they trying to get people to be different and act from? So I'd always say is after the 3 minutes, these are 3-minute experiences, how do you want people to be different? What do you want them to do? And you can't say be more aware. Being more aware doesn't count. You want them to donate money. You want them to do something actionable, recycle in a different way, whatever it is. Make sure you focus on something other than just awareness. It does focus the team on finding what does VR really benefit, because VR is not for everything. I always say VR should be the last resort, because if it can be solved with a web page, don't build a VR app around it. Build a web page, right? Make sure that everybody on the team can contribute and increases the team member buy-in. All right, so the first 5 weeks, you learn on your own how to build VR. A lot of it's doing tutorials. We come to class, and in class we talk about what VR has been good for, what the VR applications are. We'd love to have more speakers coming in, so perhaps we'll reach out to some of the people that you all have. They come talk, which is great. So in the first 5 weeks, we empower over the last year, we've empowered over 300 students to build their first VR app. And we're now scaling to potentially be in the hundreds, if not thousands, of students a year that can build VR. 5 weeks in, we now have a group of very highly motivated folks. What do they work on? Here's assignment 2. And this part is actually a ton of fun. Fourth week of class, they come in. People all across campus will come in. Those seekers that I talked to you about, they will come in and they'll pitch their idea on how to use VR. So we have a whole day we have a day, 1-2 hour section of class. They come in, and every 3 minutes they get up here and they try to pitch to you, work on my idea because my idea is awesome. And you know what? We got more pitchers than we have student teams. So the students say, how many times has you as a student gotten to choose which project you want to work on? And matter of fact, you could choose from all these professors pitching ideas. You could tell some of them, your idea is terrible. That doesn't happen too often, right? And the first few times the professor came up to me afterwards and were really mad that no teams picked them. I go, well, they chose with their feet on which projects they thought were valuable. Well, we had pitch day. 24 pitchers came in. Teams actually self-formed. Teams can select who you want on your own team. We have some great mechanisms so that you can find out who's a bum and who's can actually be a contributor on your team by tracking how well they did in assignment 1. But you get to choose who your teammates are and which projects you want to work on. Then for the next 10 weeks, you're going to build 5 iterations of your project. And that's one concept that hopefully you all can rope in, even in your 10-week size classes. If you can iterate 5 times in 10 weeks, it's going to be a much better project than giving you 10 weeks to work on the whole thing. Okay? So we iterate 5 times. Matter of fact, you get 20% of your grade or your final project every 2 weeks in class. And then at the end, we have a demo day. If you all are involved with startups, you know the concept of the lean cycle, where you do teams plan every 2 weeks. They work for 2 weeks. They check. They meet with their seeker. So if you're going to pitch a project to this class, we require you to spend at least 1 hour meeting with your team every 2 weeks. So you can't just drop an idea, then show up at the end of the semester and go, okay, show me my idea realized, because it's going to be amazing, because we know that will be terrible, right? So you have to cycle 5 times, but you have to meet with them every week for an hour. So that's a skin in the game that both sides have to put in. You have to make sure that the people pitching ideas put skin in the game. And then here's the best part: teams reflect. So this is the Scrum cycle. If you are familiar with Scrum as a way to do Agile, and that's what we actually do in the class. And so what can people do? So the first sprint, people create something like a storyboard. This is what they output. So here is the one project that actually came out of it. It was called Kalyana Mitta. It was about mindfulness. We know that mental health is a major problem. Colleges across campus, suicide rates are up. Mental health, depression, anxiety, much higher than it's ever been before. So they said, hey, an education professor said, wouldn't it be interesting if we could have students be more mindful and do mindfulness techniques before they had exams. So before you had an exam, you would look at your Google Calendar, and you had your phone beep at you and say, hey, would you like to join a virtual character for a mindfulness exam in VR? That was his pitch to the class. The students loved it. They go, that would really resonate with me. If I had a system to help me get calm and centered before the exam, because it knew when I was coming up and it had a character to walk me through it, I'd love to be on it. So one of the best teams chose this one. First 2 weeks, they actually built this thing out, which is a student puts on a headset. This is a storyboard of what they created, and they said, well, what do you think about that? And then they got user testing. Every 2 weeks, they would actually, so this is the first iteration. You see a character standing up. This is what they looked at. This is what you turn in. Actually, if you go to VR for the Social Good website, you can see every sprint's video. So you can see how this project has changed every 2 weeks. So they're talking with this virtual character, and they're going to lead them through a mindfulness technique. They got feedback. This is sprint 3. You can actually see this user is testing it now. Now we actually have an environment. We have this character that's going to lead this person through breathing exercises when they pull as they go through the experience. We also connected with graphic design, which is a fun thing. Well, why is it more than just text? We got a graphic design team to also join us, and their students actually created materials for the VR project. So they had a folder that explained what it is that you're going to. So before you walked up and after you walked away, you had a flyer that talked to you through mindfulness techniques. They helped us create icons and logos and interface. Extra cool, they actually had a yoga mat with the stuff put on it so that when you went through demo day, you're on a yoga mat that was branded and went through the experience. That's the power of having people that brought different perspectives around an experience as telling a story, right? Because if you got 4 computer scientists to do it, I'm going to tell you it would be a very technically impressive demo, but not be much of a story, right? So what did people create? I've not shown this one yet, right? I think I've shown this one several times today. I can't remember. We talked about. We saw a variety of demos from. We have seen that one, which is again, what does the world look like to people without eyeglasses? We had the university library wanted to give tours of the campus. I don't know whether I'm sure you all have campus tours where you have students and their parents walking around campus. Well, we've got a lot of parents. I'm sure you all do too. That English is not their first language. It might not even be a language that they speak, and they often have to get translated with their child, right, that's getting a tour with them. But we also know that if we can convince the parents that the University of Florida is a great place to go, they have a much easier chance that much more likely chance that their student will come here. So we are actually working with 8 different language departments to make all of our campus tours language accessible through using AR technology. So as you walk around, you get the information in a language that you are comfortable in communicating with on your phone. So that's an example of the librarians coming to us saying, hey, this is something we want to do, and we've got a large, for example, Brazilian contingent. So we have a lot. We need Portuguese, we need Spanish. We've got a lot of the Latin American languages, and also some of the East Asian languages too. We also, and so here's one project, and I know you said till. Oh, I don't want to take up too much time. So this is that example of a student who wanted to. Remember Dr. Jason Manelli? He said, hey, if I could get my students to put on a head mount and see the world through another person's eyes, what would they do? So he actually, this is his student. She gave us her CAD model of a store that she created as part of his class. It's called Spec. It's sell eyeglasses. And what she's doing now, she's navigating that store, not from her perspective, which is as an able mobility person who's probably 21, 22, very active and able to move around. But she's trying that out from the perspective of a wheelchair, somebody in a wheelchair. And what she finds out right here, she says, oh, I can't reach all the glasses. In that moment, I think everybody was extremely stunned by because that was unplanned. We just uploaded her model in the system. And what she says right there, she goes, I can't see all the glasses on the top shelf. So she designed this model. It looked great in the 3D CAD model, but she says, I can only reach the top shelf. I can't even see the glasses on the top shelf. So think about from her perspective how much empathy and how much education is really going on, as opposed to Dr. Manelli teaching her. American Disability Act is a very important concept. We've got to make sure that we design everything, all our spaces, with accessibility in mind. He goes, I talk about that all the time, And she probably got more learning in that moment than all the lectures about ADA compliance and the importance of it. Because she saw her own model was increasing the divide. They was talking about a digital divide. This is some small way that you can actually start to show folks the other way to help close some of the divides. And this one, by the way, the researchers in the world here, this actually, the undergrads who worked on this project joined that professor's research team, have gotten on papers, and he's submitting this for grants because he now has preliminary data of how this world would work. And he did this all within 10 weeks of joining, working with the class, which is exciting. And also very surprising for a lot of faculty members here. They asked me, Ben, do I need to put you on the grant? I go, I didn't do anything. Don't put me on the grant. It was you and the students. This is not meant to, it's meant to decentralize virtual reality and get the big bottlenecks out of the way. So where are we going? So we had 19, we got to 49, got to 107 with the graphic design students. This semester is a little smaller because the registrar's office messed it up. But we have got 90. We're going to be up to about 150 next semester. We're continuing to grow this class, which is very, very exciting. So we are moving from seekers and solvers. We've got the VR for social good class. We're now moving to VR for all students. So we are moving this to potentially a general education class where we could have 1,000+ students trained in VR a year. 1,000 students a year. If you had 1,000 students ready to tackle problems, what would you? How many bets could you make to try to explore what VR is good for? You can make a lot more bets, right? And I think that's very exciting. That's what we want to do, and that's why I'm here, hopefully to say, hey, if any of this is replicable and you want to tackle that, we make all our resources available, make all our class notes available, all our lectures available, all our assignments are completely transparent. So it's trying to be as inclusive as possible and decentralize the idea of building for VR. So that's part of this collaboration with other institutions. We want to move towards that, and our big goal is institutions are great, but universities, you saw that initial map where that's still centralized. How can we actually work with people in the communities who know the problems best? Because a lot of the problems in a lot of our communities are not in or around the university, but they could be in very specific locations, and we want to leverage that. So VR for class. VR for all students, where we're moving, and then VR for social good for all. So we're all going to be creators. So what did we learn? Focus on stories, not the tech. VR is a last resort. I cannot stress that enough. It's hard to get the comp sci people around that, but the more you work with other folks, the best that is. Focus on telling someone else's story. So look at organizational messages as inspiration for what needs to be told, because they're trying to do that. They're trying to change the world by telling those messages, but they're having difficulty in getting those across. If they didn't have difficulty, it would be solved. And work with a cross or a multidisciplinary team. I cannot stress with you that it's been probably, students have often come back and said that is one of the more joyous parts of the class, is getting to work with people of different backgrounds, because they learn so much more than sitting there with a bunch of comp sci people. Get building. Don't start tomorrow. The way I pitch people to pitch for my class, I go, you have a story you want to tell? If I invited you to my class, pitch day happens to be in this year, it was like September 25th. If you came in and pitched on September 25th, the students would start working on it the next day. Would you want to come pitch an idea for 3 minutes? That's a hook. Most people say, yeah, I've got a couple ideas. It better be a good idea, because we got a lot of people who want to pitch, and you better have a really good idea. And then they go, oh, okay, I got to get my A game going here. Just because I'm a professor doesn't mean people are going to choose my story. So what I hope to do, hopefully this talk has moved you to be saying, hey, a VR consumer, that's great, but I would want you to be a VR creator, because I think through creating VR, we can make this less of a niche and singular application domain. Oh, let's skip past that. So now it's the call to action. Okay? So, please, close your eyes. Both of them. Everybody close your eyes. I'm just not going to do anything weird. Now think about a story. Think about a story that if you want to change somebody's hearts and minds around something you care about, think about a story that people need to see. See it from that first-person perspective. You know, is it a friend of yours that went through a tough time? Is it you yourself that had an experience that you feel somebody else could learn from? Okay, open your eyes. You can get to, within 5 weeks, those in the class, shorter than that, you can start telling that story. Tell that story. Get people to see that world and move people. Because that's what I think will expand the role of what VR. So learn to develop VR in a few weeks, Anybody with a smartphone and a computer can do that. Explore what stories benefit from VR. So think about, go to VR for social good, see what dozens of projects before you, what people have tried, think about what you like about it. Then get building to telling your story. Start moving hearts and minds and make a real change. That ends my talk.
All right. We have about 10 to 20 minutes for questions. So if anyone has questions for Ben on how to design applications or how to think about problems, open the floor.
And if I didn't answer one of the questions you can call me to task and say, I still have that question. Please make sure you answer it. Yes?
Well, it's not so much about questions. However, still the pitch side of things is mostly academic. Am I right? Just coming from the professors from inside, or is it also open to public where the business people or the local community can pitch in?
Anybody can pitch that has the capabilities to take it outside the class. So it cannot be just a class project. And I don't mean to denigrate just a class project, but I think a lot of us have been on class projects where at the end of that class day you high-five each other and then you forget all about it. Anybody in the class, we have high school teachers. We have people that are east side of Gainesville is the low SES part of the city. Some of them have never even crossed Main Street, which shows how divided. We've got high income disparities. We have those folks who know the problems they face and their communities face. They can pitch ideas, and they're actually one of the project pitchers this year. They actually had two of them pitched. One of them got picked. So we want nonprofits. We have the Ronald McDonald House. We've got disability centers around campus. We have had startup companies. We've had the librarians, a variety of folks. Anybody who can take this idea. We have high school teachers who want to talk about vaping and how that students do not fully understand the impact of vaping. Anybody who can take this outside can pitch. A lot of them are professors. We've had professors in pediatrics and building construction, people all across campus who thought about VR as a topic. They can also pitch. But it's intentionally to say that there are many different applications, and it's to foster an environment where people can go, hey, you know what? I wonder, ... can the things that I worry about, the things that I care about, could VR help me? But you can't just pitch an idea and then that's it. We also, if you care about this, there's a huge side that I don't show about tech licensing and how to get all the intellectual property covered. So we manage and as somebody who's gone through that process, we make sure all that's taken care of so that students and the people pitching the idea can focus on the idea and see whether it's valuable. Because most ideas, they're not going to work out, right? That's just the way things are. However, if you can get people to make lots of bets and have it low risk like this, people are going to try more. And I think that's really where I'm very excited to see where VR is going to go. I was telling this story before. Whenever this latest round of VR started coming around, I went on these stories on CNN.com. They said, VR is exploding. All these bright minds are doing all this stuff with VR. And then they listed the bright minds working on the problems. And they were all my friends from the last 10 years. There's nobody new working on these new ideas. They were getting lots of press, and they're great. They're great researchers. But we want to talk about groundbreaking, brand new ideas of where VR could be applied to. I think it's going to come from, if you look at the University of Washington campus, where are those ideas going to come from? Is it inside the CS building? Is it going to be inside this building? Well, this building is a different environment. Let's say this the Paul Allen building. I'm going to guess that the odds are I would rather make lots of bets with the community at large. Right? And not only just on campus, you can think about the city and around. So that's exactly right. We want to allow a lot of folks to look into. Follow up? Yeah.
Yeah, just follow up. Just real quick, 1 minute. So the context is because I'm working with the City of Seattle, Office of Economic Development, and we have about 5 VR fellows that right now is under a pilot program for 4 months. Similar model, however, there's no pitching. We just try to activate the Rainier Valley area. So the people that are coming from the local community, the youth 18 to 25, is talking with the stakeholder, and the idea is just to focus on the social issues such as food justice. So we're putting on a simulation game in VR, but just wondering, later maybe you can talk more about it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that's very valuable to think about is the entrepreneurial angle and to make sure that, so I don't know anything about the projects, but the advice would be, how do we make sure that there is value delivered, right? Like who's the customer, where are they? So we, because of the 5 cycles, and you test every 2 weeks with users, it really helps. The projects are going to shape and get turned, which is really great. Actually, a college friend of mine, Brian Surratt, is actually in the Seattle. He's in charge of economic development, so maybe a connection we can make.
Well, David Harris is my contact in there.
Other thoughts? Yes.
So I've seen a lot of different VR projects and all of that, and a lot of them can actually be achieved by, using other technology out there, like the preparing for exam thing. It could technically be a video, and at this point, other technologies like phones and computers are way more accessible than a VR device. So how much additional value / benefit can using like the VR technology bring in, given that it's not as accessible at this point?
Great question. That's exactly what we train our students to ask the project pitchers every 2 weeks. Yes, that's exactly right. Because that was the first question. So, well, why would you want to do it on VR? And so the answer, which they iterated and they worked with users, is by putting on, and this was using Google Cardboard, right? So it's $3-4, and you can provide that with students. Is that ability to be a little escaped from the world, to show when you want to calm down right before an exam. You want to have that few seconds or a couple minutes where you're able to center on yourself, and that blocking out of the real world, even through as limited as Google Cardboard is, was valuable to them. So that it was more than a video. It was something that was responding to them. They could say, do you feel more calm now, or do you want to do another set? And there are ways you can make it interactive as opposed to just a passive experience. And they were able to discover the value is people wanted that time to be away from the real world for just a couple minutes before they went into the exam. That they only came up with that through iterating and cycling and really discovering it. At the beginning, they had a rough guess, and they were able to find it, which is fortunate. But they didn't know that at the beginning of that. But the students kept on pushing that question. Why are we doing this? Professor Locke kept on saying, just if it's on a web page, just put it on a web page, or you just have it on your phone. Just put it on your phone. Why do I need to put this inside a Google Cardboard? And they were able to find that need, and that is what is the exciting part of cycling. And trying it out with users every 2 weeks. So, yeah.
So I can see many projects, like if you deliver in VR, it can deliver the sympathy, but it's most of the time it's like the community, they want to express this message. But can you give some examples where, like, as consumer outside the community really want to try the experience, like not just like they say, oh, I want to deliver how it's experienced by disabled people, but is there any projects that's like even me, like very outside the community, I would say, yeah, I definitely want to try that.
Well, I would charge you a slightly different way. I'd say, I would love to hear from you. VR4thesocialgood.com. Okay, if you go under projects, here are, this is fall 2017, and you can see who this is for: interior design students, construction management students, investors, people on campus tours, the general public, children on the autism spectrum, patients in Africa. You can see these different topics. And here, this is the 2018. Again, this was a larger class. We had graphic design tied in here. And if you click here, you can actually see playlists. Remember, assignment 1 is what they built on their own. You have actually access to the best ones, because in a class of a large class, there's obviously a wide variety. These are the ones that came together really well. You can actually click and get a YouTube playlist and take a look at what people have tried doing. And then VR for the social good. Here we go. This is the 20 teams that the YouTube videos for all the teams, and part of it is it just takes a while for this thing to load up. But you'll see these videos of every sprint and all these updates for all these projects. So you can see some of these are, there's a wide variety of topics, from helping people on the autism spectrum, how to train journalism students on how to report during crises. And actually, again, each sprint, You can see the development, and the Sprint 5 is the last one. So this is just, again, the last version. And you can click through some these projects. Again, that was the Kalyanamitta, that was the mindfulness training. You can take a look at all the different projects that people have created. I'll actually have one playing in the background because I think this one is pretty it's pretty interesting. This one is I'll do this one. So this one is, again, this is the Ronald McDonald House, and they wanted to say is before families come to stay at the Ronald McDonald House, that means their children, unfortunately, are going to be in the hospital for an extended period of time. They're very, very nervous. They don't know what life is going to be like there at the Ronald McDonald House. And so what happens is that they're nervous coming in. So they'd say, could they go through something like this? Could they get a tour of the house and just talk to virtual agents that represented other families, what life is like in the house? So this is, and they can know where things are. And then once they get here, they can go back through this over and over again so they can get comfortable after they get a tour of the house, because that takes volunteer hours. So this was done with the Ronald McDonald House, a nonprofit that's in Gainesville. So this is an approximation of the place that they get to stay in. Now, this year we're going to do it with 360 videos because 3D modeling stressed out this team to no end. And that's not what this class is. But basically, we have a lot of projects, and here again, this is the who it's for. And I want to be very, very clear. I know it's a little on the small side. Let me try to increase the size here. These are the different groups of people that when you think about VR, a lot of it is the user and the imagination. Okay, so when a human whenever you look at these scenarios, it depends on your training, your background, as to how you see this. So I suggest to our students, making something for the public is really, really hard. Matter of fact, it might not be a good goal for you because you only have a short amount of time, and you're much better off delivering a lot of value to a small group of people than to potentially no value to everybody else. Okay, so start with that group. So is it journalism students reporting during a crisis? Right. So if you see a mob and there are two groups of protesters yelling at each other, that's actually the scenario here. How does a journalism student report on it? How can they start talking with people and understand what's going on? Now, doing that so that everybody in the world gets some benefit of it, it's really, really hard. But if you know what the journalism professor is trying to get across to the students, that actually can become a very valuable scenario for students to go through. So that would be one thing actually is, unless you have a lot of resources and time, if you can focus on it, and these are 3 to 5 minute experiences, so they're not overly long, it's much more focused to be able to have a really small group of potential users who initially try to deliver value to. More questions?
You mentioned about the business application. So, does that mean you're asking the student to think about the sustainability of the application that they're building, so that it can be released and making maybe some kind of resource for the revenue?
So, right. During the class, we have. So, if you pitching the idea, there's intellectual property ramifications and all this. So but we want there to be things that leave this class in some way. Right? So if that would be a product that could come out, yes. We've had startups say, hey, I'm interested in potentially seeing where there's a market for something. So they can pitch something. We have students who are saying, I'm building something. I really think there's something valuable here. Can I go take it, move it forward? And they can license that idea back from the university and move forward with it. And we actually want that to happen. What we've done so far is we brought in speakers that talk about how to take that next step. We haven't had people take that next step as much as we'd like. We've had, again, entrepreneurs who have pitched ideas and have learned from it. We haven't had students take an idea and started a company from that. But we are definitely wanting to continue to increase that, again, by having speakers come in saying, hey, midway through the semester, you might be thinking, where could this go? These are the next steps. Let me show you a layout of where to go with things. So if you want to take it forward, here's how to do it. But that is something that we... a lot of students, when they're done, they're just so excited to be done. It's really hard to consider moving on. But some of these ideas we do know have commercial value, potentially. And that's what this class is really able to give you a hypothesis around. And so we want people to explore that. All right. Any more questions? I'm here for one more. Okay.
Demo day. During demo day, what's happened?
Oh, yes. I forgot about. Thank you for bringing it up. So as you recall, at the end of the semester, we have demo day, which is where everybody is going to demo their work. What we have which you might actually find a lot of fun too. Here, let me. Here, I apologize. I'll quit. So here's demo day. So what we have for demo day is we have stations set up where students are able to show off their work, right? This past year we had inside the hall that they were doing a lot of the development. We created a big demo day. We did some light email mailing lists. We had almost 400 people show up. And it was a fire hazard. I think luckily the fire marshal did not come by and take a look at it because we would have definitely gotten in trouble. But there is a lot of interest from people all across campus about where things can go. So this semester we're actually going to the Florida Museum of Natural History. They can house thousands of people. So we're expecting close to 500 to 700 people showing up this year. Set up tables all around. People are going to go through it. The game that we play is when you walk in, we give you 5 poker chips. Okay? We say you invest in the idea that you like the most. So you can spread it out to 5. So you are an investor, and you got $5. Not real money. You can't turn around and not invest and ask for $5 back. That doesn't work. So you have 5 white poker chips. You are going to go around, and I made the teams. They each had a little jar, and they're saying, get them to give you their chips. So you got to go around, hear the pitches, see the station, see what drew you in. Why do they think VR would be valuable for their applications? And then students would vote with the visitors. Every visitor would come in and they would vote with their poker chips. The team with the most wins. And what did they win? I let them choose, right? And at first students would say, well, I want an A. But as you can imagine, the students who win, they tend to have an A anyways. Then they thought you get much more interested. And so the last one they wanted is to have dinner. They wanted to go get dinner with me, which I thought was really Sri and I. We told them that it's probably on the quality of Taco Bell. It's not really going to be that great a dinner, but they were still okay with it. That was what they wanted, is just spend time and just have a conversation around topics that they found interesting. But it was an investment model, an entrepreneurial model, which says, instead of which one do you like the most, if you had to put in your own money, which ones would you put money in? And it made the students very focused on their pitch to get people to come to their station, because in 2 hours with 20 stations, or 24 this coming time, you're not going to have enough time to see everything. How do you get people to come to your idea? How do you sell your idea in a short amount of time? And it was a very valuable exercise that a lot of students want. I did also, just FYI, if you can implement this, it'd be great. I said, if you get the most, you get a prize. What happens if you get the least amount of money? What should happen to your team? Of course, none of the students would ever say, oh, no, that's not fair. I wouldn't want anything. I go, shouldn't you get a 0 in the class if your idea, nobody wants to invest in it? They would not go with it. But if you could ever get some negative part, because if you want a positive, what would be the negative? They thought that was too cold. But from a business idea perspective, it is not an incorrect one to think about that many ideas don't make it, and if you don't get funding for it, your company definitely doesn't make it. So how do you ensure that is going to be something that drives thinking?
Right. I think that's all the time we have for questions. Great. Ben might be around for 5 minutes or a few afterwards, so you can chat with him. But once again, let's thank Ben for